Dean Moore, it's such a pleasure to be sitting here interviewing you, my mentor, and also one who has formed me as a student when I was a student in my MDiv program. And one of the books I still teach to my students that I was introduced to in your class is Teaching as a Sacramental Act. And a lot of my work with training youth ministers and thinking through adolescent faith and flourishing, it goes back to that book. You have so many principles that I think is relevant both to the formation of youth ministers and as we think about cultivating practices that sustain flourishing with youth. And could you just take a minute and name those practices or principles?
I'd be happy to. And before we started this, you also mentioned that you wanted me to say something about mediating the holy.
Yes.
So I could do all of that in one in one piece. But first I want to tell about my first meeting with you. So you came to Emory as a prospective student. And I happened to sit with you at lunch. And I was so impressed. I was moved by the kind of work you did. You were passionate about young people who lived in poverty, especially, and who didn't have a lot of social resources. You had already been doing ministry with them for a number of years, since you were a young person, and you still were very young, but you had ideas about what you wanted to learn and how you wanted to develop this kind of ministry, and you've done it. To me, that is sacramental teaching. But you were the teacher. You were teaching through your actions and through your inspired vision. And that to me is the heart of sacramental teaching, which is I describe as mediating the holy, or mediating the grace of God through the ordinary stuff of creation for the sanctification of human life and the flourishing of the entire creation. That's huge, but that's what the sacraments are about in Christian faith tradition. They mediate the grace of God through water, through bread and grape juice or wine, and it is not for the sake of the moment, but for the sake of the moment which permeates every moment that's going to come. So my understanding of sacramental living and sacramental teaching is that everything in the universe and God's creation is sacred. God created a sacred creation and named it good. And I could go into that. I won't do that at this moment. But if one has a sense that everything God created is sacred, then one cannot abuse another human being, or abuse a river, or throw garbage around and not work for climate change. I mean, not work against climate change. Sorry about that. One can't denigrate other human beings and the rest of creation because it is God's creation and it is sacred. And I think that's at the heart of good youth ministry, just like it's at the heart of all ministry. It's at the heart of Christian living. We live each moment of each day the best we can, and we fail all the time, with a full sense that God is present and that God is present in this sacred creation. So the reason I'm glad you asked this question is because this book just went out of print, and it broke my heart because I saw this book as a kind of culmination of a lot of years of ministry and work, and I wanted to keep building on it. So one of the things that I've just recently done is a retrospective on my life as an educator. And in that retrospective, I recognized that I would have loved to have created a youth curriculum or a youth resource that engaged with these movements that I name as sacramental in this book, and I think they are genuinely grounded in sacramental theology. I'll come back to that. But I also imagine that I would expand on this book in another book that would expand on the idea of sacramental living and the vocation of sacramental living, which I think is a vocation that young people can be inspired and encouraged to live into, just like we can be inspired and encouraged. So I'm not going to live enough young lifetimes to do all of that, but I'm aware that I feel like there's unfinished business there. And so let me go to the movements, which I draw out of experiences of teaching, especially with young people, but I also draw it out of educational theory, most especially, however, from liturgical theology and sacramental theology. So I identify them as expecting the unexpected, expecting God to be present, expecting God to be moving, even when the world looks like it's just about to fall apart. And I confess that in the last many months, I have felt daily, multiple times a day, that the world is falling apart. We're losing our soul as a nation in terms of caring for people who are the most vulnerable, who are below the poverty line, or even the working poor who are above the poverty line but barely surviving, and so forth. So expecting the unexpected is expecting that God is at work in this. And that, and expecting that our work can make a difference. That requires a huge amount of faith, because sometimes our little efforts don't seem like they're doing much at all.
Right.
So expecting the unexpected is one, and I think that's cultivated through spiritual practices and through theological reflection on God. And on God in relation to creation. The second one is seeking reversals. And this one, I think, is just made for youth ministry, because young people don't like to get pablum, and they don't like to hear the same old. They want to think new thoughts. They want to ask their own questions and have those questions be respected. So for them to look at a biblical text and say, so what's missing in our interpretations of this text? What's wrong with what we've always thought this means? What's wrong in the community that this text is talking about, and so forth? Are looking at our own local church or our own school communities and saying, what's wrong with this picture? Or what are we missing? What good is going on here that we're not even noticing and celebrating? So seeking reversals is approaching every question with self-questions. What am I missing? What would happen if we turned this on its head and saw it in a fresh way? So that's one. That's two. The third one, and I need to speed this up, I know, so I'll speed it up. So the third one is, I'm saying these out of order, but it doesn't matter. The order's not that important. Remembering the dismembered.
That's my favorite.
And again, I think this is very important to young people, because they themselves have experienced dismemberment. Mm-hmm. They have family members who are dismembered in all kinds of ways. Alcoholic, in prison, jobless, all kinds of ways. And they see things going on in the world and they don't know how to process it. But remembering the dismembered is also remembering the dismembered of other countries, other parts of the world, other times in history. So, for example, one of the eye-opening things that happened in our community recently is when one of our Korean-American students, actually she's Korean, one of our Korean students did a retrospective on Korean history and pointed out how beleaguered the South Koreans had been in the post-Korean War period, in the Korean War and the post-Korean War period. So that to understand relationships with both North and South Korea required a deeper understanding of that history, which was remembering the dismembered. And then the fourth one is Nourishing Life. And that's pretty commonly understood as what you do in youth ministry. But there are opportunities to nourish life that are so easy to miss. Opportunities when a kid wants to share something, a piece of good news to you, and the time is totally inconvenient and inappropriate. But to nourish life is to find a way to receive it. Even if it has to be, tell me the short story now and tell me the longer story later. But nourishing life, and nourishing life also includes moments of recognizing their gifts, their talents, encouraging them to develop their music or their athletics or whatever their own natural gifts are. Another one is, I'm forgetting one of them. The last one is building community and repairing the world. And these aren't in order, and they're all mixed together, but I do believe that youth ministry has a lot to do with rebuilding or building community and repairing the world. Young people deserve to be agents of transformation in their local congregations and schools and communities and families. And they deserve to be part of the repair of the world, because this is the world they're going to live in after we die, and they're going to pass on to their children and children's children. But it's a world that they live in now and that they have wisdom about that other people miss. And giving them the opportunity which they deserve to participate in that kind of life building is critical.